Please welcome to the stage Wade Davis, former NFL player and current Vice President of Inclusion and Product at Netflix. Moderated by Reginald Humphrey, Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Partnerships at General Motors.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ELC community. I'm Reggie Humphrey, Director of DEI Partnerships at General Motors. I am thrilled. I've got the pleasure of being able to have just what I'm going to call an energetic, dynamic, and engaging discussion with Wade A. Davis. He is not only an athlete, an actor, an author, but an executive at Netflix. And we are going to jump into what I love what the ELC said, a brave space. So, Wade, how you feeling, brother?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing really good. I'm excited. I'm a little sad though, because you had a Southern accent, so I was assuming that you was from the South, but you was clearly faking the funk on me.
But no, you can chalk that up to 4.5 years on the Hill at Alabama A&M University. So shout out to that HBCU pride. I did get a few pieces of Southern twang, but I'm born and raised in the Midwest, from Ohio and living in Michigan now. So what about you? I know you're traveling a lot, but where do you make home now?
So I just moved to Los Angeles in 2019. So I spent 12 years in New York City. I'm a Southerner by birth. I was born in Little Rock. I spent most of my adolescence in Shreveport. So I'm from the boot. And then I went to high school in Colorado and college in Utah. So I'm kind of a Southern Mountain West mutt.
Okay. Hey, so listen, today's session, we're going to have a FUBU moment. And we were kind of talking a little bit ago, right? We're going retro, right? We're going to go for us, by us. And I love it. And we're really going to dive into defining, or actually redefining, what it means to be a Black man. And I think that this is a topic that obviously is going to be near and dear to both of our hearts, but it's too many other people trying to write that narrative for us, right? And as someone who was heavily involved in this space of entertainment now, and you've also done that actually, obviously, as an athlete, by the time we close out this session, I want us to be able to write the narrative that we choose, right? Versus letting someone else do that. So look, let me jump right into this, man. I had a chance to be able to check you out on your website. I encourage everybody to go check out wadeadavis.com, just like it's spelled. Got a lot of insightful, not only videos, but perspectives, services, right? And so I'm just a fan. I'm a fan because, brother, when you have led, this life and made it an impact the way you have, one, our dreams, right, as an NFL player. Plenty of us men spend time buying jerseys with another man's name on the back of it. You've actually lived it. And along that journey, right, you've been able to prepare for that moment. One of the things I always tell my daughters is we got a motto, 3PIP. If you pray, prepare, and perspire, it equals infinite possibilities. So when I think about Wade's journey, right, and where you are moving across this dynamic, life and lifestyle that you've lived, and that takes really understanding who you are, right? Being able to live your authentic self. So, can you just kind of walk us through? And let me pause this by saying, I'm also a firm believer, man, that God has given every one of us certain gifts, purpose, passion, and a platform. What we do with it is up to us, right? So you've done a lot with the platforms you've been given, with the purpose, the passion and the gifts you've been given. Just kind of walk us through your journey, man.
Okay. So as I mentioned, I'm a Southern boy. So that means I was raised in the church. I was the type of kid that went to church 4 to 5 times a week, and twice on Sundays, right? Prayer meeting, Bible school, praying for the sick and shut in, all of those things. I was also a big time mama's boy. I was the type of boy that liked to be in the kitchen, playing on the floor with the Tonka trucks while your mom's cooking. And I fell into the sport of football sort of by accident. So in my neighborhood in Shreveport on the Cooper Road, my house and my neighbor's house didn't have a fence in between it, but it had a fence going around it, right? And all of the kids from the neighborhood would come into our backyard and play a game called Smear the Queer, or pick up, throw up, right?
I got you.
And that's where I realized that I was fast. I was relatively, athletic. And then as I started watching the game of football on television, intuitively I understood the game without anyone really ever explaining it to me, right? So the game of football became relatively easy. And then once I was able to match my talent, with it, I started to excel. My mother, she remarried, and we moved to Colorado when I was in the 7th grade.
Okay.
Then going into high school, around my 10th grade year was when I first had the understanding that I was not heterosexual, right? I didn't know if I was gay or bisexual or whatever, but I knew that I was not only attracted to women, that I was attracted to men too. And that was, at that time of my life, the scariest moment, because up until that point, right, like you have an assumption that you're going to be heterosexual because like that's what you see, right? And that's what the world kind of reinforces. And then when I realized that I wasn't heterosexual, right, again, I didn't know what I was, but I became I went inside, meaning that like I tried to close off the parts of myself that was attracted to other boys. And then, I'm not proud of what I'm going to say next, but I became a bully. I was, there was one openly gay kid in my high school, and we'll call him Mike, right? And because Mike had the courage to attempt to be, more of his authentic self, I hated him for it. And I hated him because I didn't have the same type of courage. You know what I mean? Like, as we all know, like adolescence is, it's an incoherent time where like life is changing so quickly, your body's changing, everything is changing around you. And to see someone with that level of confidence, right, and clarity in who they were, right, I wanted to destroy that because I wasn't that confident in myself. And then I was fortunate enough to get a scholarship to go play ball at Weber State. I went to Weber for 4 years. I was a good athlete. I didn't think I was good enough to go to the NFL. And then my senior year, I remember a scout from the Pittsburgh Steelers came to practice one day, and I asked my coach, I was like, "Who's he here to see?" And he looked at me, was like, "You fool!" And I was just like, "Oh," And I proceeded to have the worst practice of my entire life, because I'm trying to be Deion Sanders, what I mean? And I remember after the practice, the scout came up to me and he said, "Look, what you did on that field today, don't do that again. I'll be back tomorrow, right? I know you can play, and I get it, right, that my presence kind of shook you up a little bit. But from that moment on, I started to believe that I had just enough talent to make it to the NFL. And I signed with the Tennessee Titans as a free agent. I was not a big name player. I was cut and signed and sent over to NFL Europe. I won an NFL Europe championship with the Barcelona Dragons. I got cut by the Titans again, sent back over to NFL Europe, signed by the Seahawks, cut by the Seahawks, signed by the Washington team at that point. And then after 4 years of being a journeyman and going back over to NFL Europe, I hurt my knee. And then I just wasn't good enough, right, to keep trying to make a team.
Okay.
From there, I moved back to Colorado. And then I, at that point in my life, I knew I was a gay man. Like there was no question, right? I had yet to really be open about that to anyone. So I decided to move to New York City. I needed to discover not just who I was, but what I was. You know what I mean? And New York City gave me the ability to do it with a certain level of invisibility, right? Like no one knew me there. I had one friend. So I was able to explore life as a gay man, right? And see could I do it? You know what I mean? Because like I knew that I could, fake the funk and be a hetero presenting man, right? But I didn't know if I could live my life as a gay man. And New York City, it gave me the ability to explore that.
Okay. So let's dive into some of, because again, this is all about defining and redefining what it means to be a Black man. So you talked about a lot, right? In that, and I want to roll through like almost like to the intersectional point, right? Because you talked about your faith, your life in church. You now you're a professional athlete, right? But now you're figuring out who you really are. You're showing up as who you need to be. And I'm always a big fan of saying that for Black men specifically, right? We got to show up and show out. We have no room for error. So when it comes to, and representation matters so much, especially now in corporate America. So let's me and you take a ride down in one of the New York Manhattan streets, right? We're gonna get to this intersection called gay man, called corporate executive, called NFL athlete, and then on the other corner, let's throw the church in.
Okay.
This is the Times Square
Yeah.
we live in the times that we're living.
It's some real Kimberly Crenshaw stuff.
right. Exactly. So walk me through the show out to still be you, and give some insights to this great ELC community around how you navigate that world of intersectionality to make sure that, because I listened to one of your videos and you talked about performing masculinity, right? Yeah. Again, as I watched a couple of different videos, and again, I encourage all of you to go check him out, because I think that no matter what you believe, no matter your lifestyle, no matter your value system, I'm always a big believer. If you lead with your heart, when it comes to the inclusion, you can learn from everybody you engage with, right? True. And so I learned a lot just listening to you. But we in the middle of that block. Give us an idea as to how you navigate to make sure that from now as a corporate executive that you're successful and that you can show up and show out anywhere you go.
The first thing that I had to do was unlearn so much, right? I had to unlearn anti-Blackness, like within myself, right? Gotcha. The world gives you the belief that being Black is not of value, right? I had to unlearn patriarchy, like the belief that because the world sees me as a man, right, that I am better. I had to unlearn internalized homophobia. I hated being gay. Like I didn't want to be gay. So I had to unlearn, I would say, those three things. Actually, there's a fourth thing. I had to also, so I grew up with a speech impediment. So okay. I also had to find my own voice, and not just the voice of what other people gave me, right? But like finding my own voice. And the thing that gave me that, and this may sound strange to some people, it was the introduction of feminism. It was reading Bell Hooks and Audre Lorde and Alice Walker and Toni Morrison, like reading the work of Black women really helped me. It gave me the language to describe what was happening in my mind, right? So like just the language that Kimberly Crenshaw gave us of intersectionality, right? Like that framework, right, helps me describe like what it means to sit, to your point, at that intersection of all of those things. I would say the hardest thing that I didn't expect to have to unlearn was that when you tell the world that you're gay, right, that I'm trying to work through my internalized homophobia, I had to also unlearn the lie that Black people are more homophobic than white people, and therefore Black people won't love me as much, right? Because like that's something that I didn't realize that I was going to have to overcome, right? Because the myth is that Black people are more homophobic, right? But what is true is that one, like how would one measure that, right? First of all, and two, right? If you look at any of the laws, like any of the anti-sodomy laws that are on the books in any state, right, ever, Black people have never had the social, political, economic power, right, to enact any of those homophobia inside of us, right? So white people put those laws on the books, right? But the narrative that you hear, right, is that, oh, the Black community this, the Black community that, right? So when I had to like really unlearn that Black people will love me, some of them won't, but white people won't love me and some of them will also, right? So like that was another component that I really had to unlearn. And then I had to find places and spaces where I didn't have to perform, right? So as you said, that I believe that we perform ideas of masculinity, right? So like I used to wear a 36 size pants. Why? Because I'm trying to give an image of something, right? I used to wear triple fat gooses and starter jackets and jerseys that were far too big for me, right? Now, I would never have worn some skinny jeans, or I would never have sat with my leg crossed over like a stereotypical woman does, right? Why? Because I want to signal to certain people in the room, right? Something about me. I had to realize that, and comes from Audre Lorde, that if I did not define myself for myself, I would be smashed in the imaginations of others and eaten alive. And when I read that quote, it hit me like a brick, because I had allowed other people to define me, right? Like I had allowed other people to tell me that I'm not Black enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not all of these things enough. And it was that, and then the last thing, it was Mr. James freaking Baldwin. Like there is no greater influence on my life than Bell Hooks and James Baldwin. Bell for just being a truth teller, right, at all costs, and James for being able to articulate what it was like to be a Black gay man with a certain level of consciousness. Like those two people really just helped me, understand not just what I was, as I said earlier, but who I was, or who I am.
I love it. I love it. So let me dive into something relative to, I mean, again, to take the journey of a pro athlete, right? And now as an executive in corporate America, and as you found out who you were, as you unlearned a bunch of stuff, right? One of the things that I liked, that commitment and discipline that has driven you your entire life. How do you take that same commitment and discipline from preparing in the NFL to now as a vice president at Netflix? Like, what are some of those lessons learned, or what keeps you like in that same framework, that same game plan of, look, I got a wide receiver in front of me, I'm locking you down, sitting in a conference room, right, where there's a whole bunch of folks that don't think inclusion really matters.
Facts.
Right?
Facts.
Walk us across that bridge from the NFL to Netflix.
It's not that dissimilar, right? So I had a coach when I was graduating from Weber State who told me, he said, hard work guarantees you nothing, but without it, you don't stand a chance. And who you really are is what you do when no one's watching you, right? Right. Like what I do when no one's in the room is actually who I really am at core. And what I had to realize was that when I was trying to make it to the NFL, right, I had a level of focus, right, that was centered around excellence. It was not centered around the idea of success. And there's a difference to me between success and excellence. Agreed. Success is somebody goes, oh, Wade Davis, you got this job, you've done this, you've done that, you're successful. But they don't know what I do when no one's watching, right? Excellence is only what I get to determine, right? I get to determine, do I wake up at 6 o'clock and am I on TikTok for 2 hours? Or am I reading something for 2 hours, right? Am I watching something? Am I trying to challenge the way that I think, right? Am I surrounding myself with people who are also going to challenge the way that I think? Do I surround myself with people who help me chase excellence, and who are disinterested in focusing on an American version of what success looks like? Because what I deem successful, the average world doesn't. You know what I mean? Like I'm not so I've got a niece, right, who really is so smart, right? Like I was trying to convince her that she should go to an Ivy League school for grad school, right? And I'm telling her that they're like, hey, like if you go here, it sets you up for blah, 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 blah. And she said, ain't you the one told me that I get to define what my value set is? What if that's not my value set? Is trying to be a stoic executive. Like what if there's something else that I'm chasing, right? So I have to remind myself, like, what is it that I'm actually chasing? And what I'm chasing is a version of excellence that means when I sit in a conversation with somebody like you, right, that people hear me talk, go, that brother's still evolving. He's still growing. He's still chasing something. And as an athlete, you're always chasing excellence. You're always chasing that next play. Can you get better? Can you get better? So what football gave me was the discipline. It gave me a thirst to be excellent. It also gave me a value of of a community, of a team, of a family, right? Because what we as athletes miss the most, yes, we miss the competition, but what we really miss is our boys. We miss the locker room conversation. We miss the ability to be intimate with another man in a space where it's acceptable, right? And so if we can take away the historical sexual tint to the word intimate, right? But the locker room is an intimate space where men of all shapes, creeds, or whatever come together and perform a certain level of intimacy, right?
Yeah.
And if men can get out of if we as men can get out of our own way, right, and realize that we need intimate spaces with other men where we're not performing for each other. And what the locker room oftentimes gave me was that I didn't have to perform as much, right? So the men who I associate myself with now, my true friends, like we get to challenge each other. We're not performing vulnerability. We're actually embodying it because we know that is that's the only way for us to get free.
So, man, free. Wow. You know, especially coming up on Juneteenth, right? What does freedom really look like for us, right? Because it can be defined in a lot of different ways, right? A question was basically, how did you manage your homosexuality while playing in the NFL, considering the hyper masculinity of the league in itself?
I didn't manage it well. What I did, and people call it compartmentalizing. No, what I did was try to kill off that part of myself. Like I spent copious amounts of time trying to not kill myself in the literal sense, right? But in the figurative, like mental sense, right? Like being hyper vigilant of the way I walked, the way I talked, the way I ran. Like I was so vigilant of everything that I stripped away anything that could be deemed authentic to me.
Gotcha.
And the sad part about it is I didn't get a chance to really enjoy living out my childhood dream.
That's deep. So let me ask you this: what you had to strip away, to be successful in the NFL, are you still stripping it away as an executive at Netflix? Because now you're sitting between. Because one of the questions that came in, right, is the position you have now. You're very conservative white men, right, who are making decision makers as gatekeepers, but you're trying to push an agenda to support Black and marginalized folks, right, about who you are. So are you still stripping it away now? Or and if you are, right, going back to the evolution you talked about, what advice can you give all of us for how to minimize that? Because I think we're all guilty of stripping down.
Oh yeah, there's no question.
Authentic self, right? Like, you know, I'm 6'2", over 300 pounds. I just can't react the same way a white woman can react when you're frustrated, right? Or I can't even look, you know, a certain kind of way on a virtual meeting, right? Or otherwise I'm deemed as intimidating, right? So let's just get down. I love that word. You had to strip away some of your authentic being in order for you to survive and thrive in the NFL. How do you translate that now in corporate America?
Yeah, so I'd be lying if I didn't have to still comport myself in ways that may not be germane to who I am, right? But what I have to recognize, right, is like, what is the actual power that I do have, right? And I define power as the ability to control the destiny of yourself and others, right? So what power do I really have? And one of the things that I try to do is to divest in trying to mimic whiteness or try to mimic something that is not who I am, right? So let's take the word imposter syndrome, right? It's a term that I often hear a lot of Black folks and just young executive, like young folks in the corporate world say, right? But it's actually not imposter syndrome that's the issue. It's bad leadership that's the issue. It's bad leadership, right? Because if you get hired as a Black person in any company, especially at a manager level, you are exceptional. It's just fact, right? It's just fact, right?
Absolutely.
So if we feel like an imposter, it's because we have a leader that's not giving the proper context, who is not setting me up to be successful. So instead of me trying to look at myself with a fine-tooth comb, I'm gonna look at the system and go, it's not me here. So I'm not going to continually, strip myself apart, rip, and, like continually try to critique myself. I'm going to actually look externally and go, what are the questions I need to be asking of others so that they can start to do that introspective work that we naturally do, right? So like one of the things that a Ta-Nehisi coach says that I love, right, is the idea that our President Obama said that we have to be twice as good to get half as much, right? But white folks can be half as good and get twice as much, right? So like why would I work myself to death for half as much? I wouldn't do that, right? What I'm going to do is to just focus on excellence and trust that I am enough, right? Because as long as I'm still buying into a white supremacist culture that is never going to accept me, right? Right?
Yep.
It's never going to accept me. So all I have to do is accept myself, right? So, to our broader conversation around like redefining manhood is like we as Black men have to decide, right? What type of man do we want to be, absent of all the external messages that we have been given, right? Like who are we at core, right? Like if you wake up in the morning and say, what are the things that I'm doing every day that I shouldn't be doing, right? And you sit with that, right? Or you start to really interrogate, who am I surrounding myself with on a day-to-day basis that doesn't allow me to chase excellence? Why am I doing those things, right? So like there are real things that we can do for ourselves that allow us to be able to better navigate these spaces, right? So that when the microaggressions happen, also a word I don't like, because I don't think there's a such thing as a microaggression. Like, like what's the measure of when it becomes micro and macro, right? So yeah, like I just think that the corporate space, we have to know what it is, and we have got to ask better questions of other people instead of saying, I feel like an imposter here. Like, you're not an imposter. That company is the imposter.
So how do you hold the folks around you accountable, right? You talked about that bad leadership that makes you feel, right, the need to do all these things. But if you're a mid manager, right, if you haven't reached a level of leadership, do you have any advice for those that need to hold their leaders accountable, but you can still do it with some political savvy, so you don't sabotage?
Yeah. So you use it. You ask the right question that centers what the overall business objectives are, right? So, for example, right, if I have a leader who is creating a culture on the team, right, that doesn't allow me and other folks like me to thrive, a good question could be is, what do you think is the impact of you as a leader not creating the conditions for people who look like me on this team to be better, and how is that impacting the longer trajectory of the business, right? I took it away from just me, right, and I took it to a place where this individual as a leader has to center, right? And I used a question, right, that forced this leader to sit at the intersection of culture and business goals, right? The other thing is that we have to force leaders, when we're asking them questions, to be specific, right? It's no different from when, let's say that that you're looking at that someone on your team is trying to be is assessing a candidate of color, right? And that leader says, "Oh, well, Reggie, I really liked him, but he lacked strategic thinking." That's not an answer.
Right.
That's not an answer. Right? What we got to push is to go, help me understand what exactly you were assessing for when you said strategic thinking, and give me an example of what he said or didn't say that made you think that he wasn't a strategic thinker, right? Like, that's how we actually force people to get real, right? As long as we allow them to sit in a space of ambiguity, to sit in a space of what's the word? Of an absence of specificity, right? Then they can continue to keep us out of these types of leadership spaces. But when you force someone to get really specific, and when you ask questions, right, that are open-ended questions, not just a yes or no question, right? But to force people to have a great level of specificity, right? Then they have to hear themselves offer you a lot of BS, right? And then you could go, it seems to me that you didn't really fully assess Reggie. right?
Yeah.
So
I
maybe
love
there's a gap, right? You know what I mean? Because oftentimes our biases, right, as you know, right, are formally at play. But the
Yep.
way that you reduce bias is you add rigor to the
Yep.
process, right? So by asking better questions, asking more specific questions, right, you're forcing your manager or leaders to be hyper rigorous and much more sophisticated, right? Here's another example, right? People often say, oh, we want to bring in different forms of representation. We want to hire more women. We want to hire more Black folks. Help me understand what you think hiring a Black person into this organization is going to do for the business.
Besides your diversity metrics.
Exactly, right? Right. So like force people to give you a specific answer and then double click on it and say, what do you think that this person's lived experience as a Black person is going to bring into our organization? Right?
Right. And are you really ready for that lived experience?
Yes. Then you can say, hey, as a leader, what have you done to prepare yourself to be able to lead across boundaries of difference? You see what I'm saying? Like now you start to get real specific and so at Netflix, we get to do that, right? So at Netflix, every vice president on the product side has a diversity and inclusion coach, has a coach where they meet with for 45 minutes once a month. They get homework, they get pre-reads, they have to then go run sessions. So we also have a trainer model, right? Where it's not just that you actually get to talk about it, you actually got to be about it. So what does it mean that you as a leader have to not just know who Kimberly Crenshaw is and the term intersectionality, but you got to know the case law that it was based in. Yeah. You got to know who Emma DeGraffenreid is, and you got to also know how to apply that in your day-to-day, right? So like that's how you really force people to get serious. Now, it ain't perfect, right? But you really force your leaders to have an authentic, specific explanation. Sorry, I just got passionate there.
No, man, I love it. Look, I already knew they wouldn't have enough time for us to really get into everything we want to get into. But I want to do two things before we have to close this out. One is, and I love this question. I'm probably not going to be able to get to everybody's question, but I think you're going to give me an authentic answer. Mental health, huge issue for us showing up in our authentic selves, for our ability to navigate these waters. Has formal therapy, and this specific question that said, did or does therapy play a large part in your life?
Therapy did. I don't have a therapist now, right? I do, and someone might not consider this therapy, but for me, it's important. I meditate for 20 minutes minimum every day, right? And what that does for me is it allows me to quiet my mind. What I did learn from therapy was I had to create a space for myself, right? And I'm intentional not to use the word safe space, right? I'm intentional. I'll be also transparent. I don't particularly love the idea of bringing your authentic self to work, right? Because there are parts of me that I have to leave at home because that is a different type of space, right? So if me and you are at home playing spades where I'm busting you up, right? Going Boston, right? Or we playing dominoes where,
I don't go to Boston, even for the finals. I don't go.
Right, well, we're playing dominoes and I force you to renege or something, right? Like the way I'm going to bring to that conversation is not the way I'm going to bring at work, right? So we have to be disinterested, as Baldwin would say, in slogans and really get underneath what we're really asking people when they say, what is someone really saying when they say, I want to bring my authentic self to work? Like, what are they really saying? And we have to ask people, what does that mean, right? When someone says, I need a safe space, as Bell Hooks says, ask somebody, what does that mean? Black folks ain't never had no safe space. We've been always stood in a circumstance of risk, right? Now, what therapy has helped us do is to understand and navigate the risk that we have to sit in, right? But what anyone listen to this video, right? Like, we can't fall in love with slogans. Like this whole safe space, authenticity, right? Like, what are we really asking for? And be specific.
Yeah.
Right? Because when you tell your leader, I need authenticity or I need safety, they can't do nothing with that.
You got
to be specific. Like, what do you actually mean when you say you want a safe space? Because also, if you're in a room of 50 people and everybody wants a safe space,
somebody ain't gonna be safe.
Somebody ain't gonna be safe, right? You know what I mean? So like, it's like I just want us to challenge the language and get underneath the actual language and stop allowing ourselves to buy into slogans or to buy into things that's not us, because we as a people, we as Black folks have always focused on excellence. And what Black excellence is all about is not just taking for face value what the world has given us.
Wow. No, I mean, I love it. Look, we get ready to run out of time. So I'm gonna ask you to put on your actor, advocate, executive at Netflix, LGBTQ advocate hat on, the helmet on, right? We got one last game. We got one last play, right? How do you help to draw up a play where we redefine, write our own narrative of what being a Black man specifically in corporate America? Like, run me through this last Hail Mary play where we actually achieve, right, that Black excellence, that success as we define it. And I want you to, I purposely wanted to string out this question because I want to give you that closing moment to be able to help us write the new story, to show a new way forward in how Black men in America, specifically in corporate America, can actually hold that trophy up at the end of that career journey.
This is going to be far too simplistic of an answer, so I apologize. We cannot, we have to decide for ourselves what we value, right? Like, is being an executive the thing that we really want to be? Like, I'm an executive now, right? But I didn't aspire to be that, right? Like, what I aspired to be was an honorable man, right? But I didn't say a good man, because I'm gonna do some stuff that ain't kosher all the time, right? Yeah. An honorable man means that I can take accountability publicly, right? So if I do some harm to you, I'm gonna listen to you tell me about the harm that I did, and I'm gonna make a commitment to go away and learn about why I caused the harm, learn what that harm looked like, and I'm gonna ask you, can I come back in 4 weeks, 5 weeks, tell you what I learned about myself so that you can trust that I'm less likely to do that again? That's what I mean by being an honorable man. So that means that I stay in a constant space of learning, and I'm disinterested in elevating what other people have and thinking that that's the end goal, right? Because the end goal is working ourselves back to one. You know, not to quote Brian McKnight, right? But like, we're trying to work ourselves back to one, right? And as long as I'm comfortable with everything that I do, and I'm comfortable taking accountability of that publicly, then I'm good.
All right, man. So you got a book that's on the way. We got 2 minutes remaining. Give us, I know the book may not have an official name to it, but I want everybody to go to wadeadavis.com. I want you to social media tag this brother. I want you to reach out, but give us a recap of what do you want people to walk away from when that book drops?
I'm trying to write a book where I, as a man, do not tell other people what they should do to get back to yourself. But I'm trying to write a book that forces us to ask ourselves questions so that we can decide for ourselves the type of man that we want to be. I'm going to try to, it's a polemic. It's going to be a mix of journalism, memoir, and history. But I want we as men to divest in all of the things that kept us from finding out who we are. You know what I mean? Because I spent so much time not figuring out who I was, you know, like not spending time, like, so part of this book also is I want every Black man specifically to get to know our mothers and the women in our lives as women, not as this provider, not as this idealized person, but what does it mean to actually sit down with your mother and understand what her life was like before you? Because she was a woman before you. She had a life and she had dreams, right? When I did that with my mom, changed the way I looked at my mom forever. My mama is an OG, but not because of what she sacrificed for me, but because of who she is, right? And like, so I want men to do that type of work.
That's rich, brother. That's rich. Look, we are out of time. Wade A. Davis, brother, I appreciate you dropping these pearls of wisdom and inspiring. You created a moment, right? I told my kids this year we're going to create many moments, MINI, to create many moments, right? MANY. You did that for us today. Thank you, ELC. Thank you, Wade, for just giving of your time, your talent, and your treasure. And we just appreciate you, man. God bless you in everything that you do moving forward, brother, because I know it's going to be done with power because you keep asking questions until you get to the right answer. Thank you, brother. I appreciate you.
Have a good day, man.